For those of you who don't know me, I'm Bobbi Sear. I'm the Director of Children, Youth, and Family Ministries here at St. Matthew's. But if you had asked me back in high school, working in ministry is definitely not where I thought I would be. I grew up in the Lutheran tradition, born and raised, baptized and confirmed, the whole deal. Because I grew up in the church, I used to think that I didn't have a faith story because I didn't have one of those coming to Jesus moments in my life. But looking back, I saw all of these random things interconnected throughout my life like a beautifully spun spider web. After I graduated from high school, my plan was to attend community college for 2 years. However, after a year, I randomly got a postcard in the mail from California Lutheran University for their sports med program, which at the time is what I wanted to do. But I hadn't put that out there at all. This is when we had dial-up internet and we didn't go on campus tours, and it truly felt like a God moment. So I looked into Cal Lutheran and felt this draw to be there. And in the fall, I was moving into the transfer dorm with my new roommate from Japan. But I soon found out that I was too far behind in practicum hours, and I couldn't get the classes that I needed to graduate in 4 years. So I decided to change majors to business marketing. While at CalU, I got involved as a peer advisor and in student government, planning events for the campus and the residence halls. And I also worked in the office of campus ministries, which is where I met Pastor Scott and Melissa. I think God puts people into our lives for a reason, and it's no mistake that I found myself working alongside these two amazing people who happened to see gifts in me. Pastor Scott brought me alongside him to help him plan youth gatherings, which was such an awesome experience. And Pastor Melissa, well, before I graduated, she told me that I should think about going to Japan through the ELCA's Global Missions Program. And I have to admit, I was a little taken back and surprised. And I asked her why. She pointed out that I talked about my experience in Japan a lot, which made sense. So I asked her more about the program, and she said I'd probably be teaching English. And right then I was like, nope, no thank you. See, my whole life, people told me that I would be a great teacher or that I should go into teaching, and I always shut it down and turned away. I guess I thought I couldn't do it or that I'd be bad at it, and I didn't want that kind of responsibility. But she asked me to look into the program. So I did. And I found, according to the website, that they were hiring for 2 positions that weren't teaching. One was for someone who would be planning national events and gatherings for students, and the other was for someone who would work closely with the students at the University of Tokyo. Both of those sounded perfect, and they weren't teaching. So I applied, and the day after graduation, I flew back to Chicago for my interview. In the interview, they were asking very specific questions, and I told them that my answer would depend on which of those 2 positions I was interviewing for. And almost in full stereo, all 3 interviewers said, teaching English, of course. And I remember literally slumping down in my chair, and the questions continued. Only this time they were all teaching related, and after a series of no answers, I remembered the speaker at graduation had told us, God doesn't call the qualified, God qualifies the called. So I told them that I was completely not qualified for this position, but I had heart and passion, determination, and a love for Japan, and that God would give me what I needed. So sure enough, the next day they called and asked if I was ready to go to Japan. I didn't know any Japanese. My degree was not in teaching. I would not know anyone. In 2.5 years, it seemed like such a long time. But somehow I trusted. And like James and John dropped their nets, I dropped everything I knew and flew halfway around the world to do something that I literally ran away from my entire life. Literally, like Jonah running away from God's call. And you know what? After a week of being in the classroom, I knew I had found my passion. And God totally had to pull one over on me to get me there because I would not have gotten there on my own accord. 2.5 years turned into 4.5 years, and I found myself back in the States, and I knew it was all wrong. I wasn't supposed to be there. I had this strong sense that my time in Japan was not over, and I had this urge to get back. I ended up finding another job at a different Lutheran school, and a year later moved back to Japan. I spent 4.5 years teaching again, and I grew so much. But then I felt like it was time to move back to the States, that I needed to be near family again. And so I started looking for jobs. Little did I know at the time how much I would need my family, but God knew. This move was scary for me. I would be starting completely over. No friends, no job, no car, no home. Over and over, I prayed to God that I couldn't do this on my own, that I needed God's guidance and help. And suddenly, jobs started popping up, and they were all right near home. I happened to be on the ELCA's website one night and found this job for a youth director at this church that was just 20 minutes away from my family. And as I read through the job description, I suddenly realized that everything I had done up to that point had completely prepared me for this job. I had a degree in business marketing, I had event planning experience, I had leadership experience, I had teaching experience and experience writing curriculum, although teaching English and teaching about God are pretty different. But I figured God would take care of that. It was like all of a sudden, what seemed like random occurrences finally made sense. God had been preparing me my whole life for this job. Looking back, I can see God's presence in my life and how God called me in different ways. Even getting me to this point at this church was a year of prayer. When Pastor Casey posted in a Facebook group asking if anyone was looking to relocate to the Pacific Northwest, I felt like she was talking directly to me. And I was like, here I am, send me. One thing I learned is to pay attention to those feelings and nudges as God speaks through different people and the Holy Spirit works in my heart. I've learned that listening to God's call is a lifelong journey and to practice patience because God's timing is definitely not my own, but that God's plan is better than I could have ever imagined. God's still talking and I'm still listening.